This is What If I Told You, the event psychology video podcast for event professionals, in which Victoria Mady, event consultant and host, talks with the world's top minds in behavioral science, neuroscience, and psychology on how to transform events using insights about human behavior and mind.
Hello, I'm Victoria Mady, and this is What If I Told You, the event psychology video podcast, where I talk all things event psychology, that is how to apply brain science insights in events. And today I'm talking with Daria Tikhonova, and Daria is a human experience researcher with a decade-long career in interdisciplinary academic and commercial research. She is also the founder and principal consultant at Deep Thoughts, a Flinders academic in humanities and social sciences with a PhD in tourism, and a manager of a Flinders University project that aims to elevate the role of creative arts in care settings. Her other research interests include transformative experiences, risk perceptions, cultural tourism, tourist behaviors, and cultural diversity. Welcome, Daria.
Hello, Victoria. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining me today from, I guess, sunny Adelaide.
Yes, almost sunny. Yes, it's afternoon here.
Well, I should admit that I have never heard of a title of this term, human experience researcher, and it sounds fascinating, you know. And it feels really relevant to the events industry, which is all about, creating experiences for people. So, what does a human experience researcher do?
Yes, it's a great question. I'm glad you started with that. And a lot of people are asking it. And recently I've had a couple of mentoring sessions with researchers as well who are keen and curious. And ultimately, it's in a way, it's a buzz term. So it's a term that has the UX research and customer insights research, CX, UX have evolved into. And I have a very particular view on it, so I'm using the term, but ultimately what it communicates is that you do the research that is focused on deeper understanding of people and their behaviors and integrating that understanding of how a particular event in their life, whether it's an interaction in a retail store or if it's an attendance to an event, fits into the bigger picture of their lives. So not viewing someone exclusively as a consumer or as an event attendee, but as a human being that comes in with a life story and lives with a certain experience and integrating that. So, so in a way, it's an evolvement of all the research that has been done to date.
That's super interesting and very relevant in any industry, in any business, I guess, right? And I know that your focus is on helping organizations improve their services through customer insights. So my question is, what do you think of Adam Ferrier's famous statement that listening to your customer is a bad idea? And for those of you who are not familiar with Adam and his work, Adam Ferrier is a consumer psychologist, brand strategist, and author of the book Stop Listening to Your Customer. And he explains there in detail and pretty convincing, in my view, why we should not listen to our clients or customers. So what do you think about that?
Yes, another good question and a good one to open up with. I first came across Adam's work in 2020 at Nudge Stock 2020, a couple of years ago. And I've got to say, with a person with so much experience and success in what he does, you've got to listen to, and he's got a good point. And I was curious as to why you decided to start with this question and what attracted you to it as well. Do you mind if I flip?
Of course, yes. The reason why is that this whole statement, this whole idea is kind of controversial because we are being taught and we are discussing this issue of, the client is always right and we need to listen to the customer to get the idea what customers want. And we want to go with that flow and sort of implement what our customers desire, and so improve our service accordingly. But Adam says, this, he puts it, in a completely different direction, right? And he says, like, you don't need to listen to your customer, and that's how you innovate, and that's how you make your services or your products better. And I feel like there is some truth to it, and maybe we should do both. Although, it's kind of, again, it's the opposite directions, right? So in events, for example, we do a lot of surveys and a lot of things, a lot of aspects are built based on what our audience tells us, right? And sometimes it feels that we do it too much. And so I was, I was always interested in learning and considering more about, shall we do that, or shall we not, listen to our audience, to our participants, and just provide them with something that may not immediately feel right to them, but maybe that's exactly what they need.
Yeah. Love that. I'm just going to take a quick note of that. Doesn't feel exactly right, and I'll come back to it. It's a great point. So it's and Adam talks about that, and you've heard the famous Henry Ford phrase that if you ask customers what they want, they would tell you faster horses.
Exactly.
So I would say my view on this is it depends on how we define listening. So what we mean by listening, and also what sort of where the insights come from, and what we do with those insights. And there's a difference between asking people directly and asking people indirectly. And so a lot of the research that I do is qualitative research. So I do surveys as well, and I appreciate multi-method research and triangulating the insights from different sources. But a lot of what I do comes from that deeper understanding of reading. And if you think about surveys, oftentimes, majority of the time, it's based on self-reported retrospective answers, right? So whatever it is that we can recall. So we rely on our memory, and then the recency bias comes in, right? And majority of the responses are also going to really be relevant to our strongest emotions. So whether it's positive or negative emotions, and hence, most of the time, people who are okay, they don't really feel that much of the feedback, and you get those polar opposites, and then you think what to do with it. So in that respect, listening to customers and asking them directly, there is a point to it, because there's a certain level of accuracy, and I would say that it would be incorrect to say that we're not aware of what we want. We may not always come back with the right solution as to how to fix it. Is that what we want? But level of awareness depends. On certain things, we're pretty sure that we don't like that food, or we didn't like certain aspects about the speaker, or we did, or we would like to see certain events. So it does make sense to ask those questions, in my view. But you also want to see what you can get from more unprompted responses and observable behavior that is not directly reported, that over-rationalized response that we do, right? So if you ask someone about, and that's a frequent question, and I'll try to bring as much as I can from my tourism background. I'm not an events person, but obviously that's a major aspect of that training. And often we ask, what motivated you to come to this particular event or this particular place? What brought you here? And we start to over-rationalize, right? So there's an interesting example that I recall from my PhD thesis, and that was on tourists traveling overseas on organized tours. And I wanted to ask them about their motivations, but I went around it in two ways. So I gave them a pre-interview questionnaire. That was a list of options to choose from, multiple choice. And there was about, I can't remember now, over 20 different types of reasons why you might travel to a certain country. And we talked about their prior travel. And the other one was obviously during the interview. And it was really interesting how when I started the interview by asking how did you decide to pick this particular tour and go to that particular destination? And the answers were quite circumstantial, right? So some of them said, oh, well, my sister was thinking of going. And I thought, well, that's about good timing, right? So I'm going to go. Or I just don't know. I was just looking at wherever I want to go and that popped up. Okay, so very circumstantial. So we think we can over-rationalize, and obviously we do, right? And that depends on how involved we are in the purchase as well. And that's something that Adam also talks about, is that level of involvement. So we do give it certain consideration, but at a particular, what makes that switch, right? So what tips the scale? And so there's truth to the surveys. And so if you compare those interview answers and the survey answers, what comes through is the persistence in our interests and our choices. And over time, you as an individual and myself as an individual and a particular segment of our audience, they came there for fairly homogeneous reasons. And we are interested in certain subjects, right? But if you are interested in kind of understanding more what triggers it and what makes that final decision, sometimes it's quite unexpected. So does that answer your, your question?
But I'm thinking, you know what? So do you think surveys is a waste of time, given that event organizers have little control over, how many people respond, and if there is a need in some clarification of the questions, they don't have control over that as well. So if there are any better ways, then maybe we should go for them rather than just waste our time with surveys. Or, or does it matter? I mean, what do you feel? And I mean, again, maybe from your perspective as an attendee, because I'm sure that you experience that, and you when you're attending an event, you always get those surveys, post event, right? So what do you think about that? Shall we go for it, or shall we abandon, this practice of surveying attendees?
Yes, I am someone who's very pragmatic in my work, right? And I'm a big believer you need to look at what you can objectively achieve, what's accessible to you. And so I would say don't discard the surveys, right? It's about how, interestingly enough, a lot of insight came through, because I've got an academic background as well. So I was teaching at Flinders University here in Adelaide for 10 years on and off, sometimes longer projects, sometimes shorter ones, and seeking feedback from students on lectures. So every lecture is an event, okay? And attendance is a major problem. So how do you get them to attend? How do you get them to interact? How do you maximize the value for them? And look, it's about asking the right questions, but it's also communicating the value of collecting that feedback, right? And survey is a very efficient method of collecting feedback. And if we look at more creative ways, and again, I can draw some examples on being a lecturer, managing those events with classes of up to 150 students, what we've done quite successfully is integrating feedback into the learning experience. So if you do really actually want to find out more and not rely on whatever was the recent event, so for example, at the end of the conference, you ask how they felt about the whole experience and what they can recall. And most of the time, they will probably be basing their answers, again, on the most recent ones or the ones that stood out in a good or a bad way, right? And so collecting feedback throughout, so letting, for example, and it depends on the event type as well, but if we talk about conferences, right, business events, then collecting feedback for every presentation and encouraging every presenter to integrate feedback collection. And I'm sure you've come across some of those ways where you can use an emoji in Zoom. How is everyone feeling? Okay, that's part of the experience. Or extending it and making it part of the learning through some reflective exercises. I call them exercises, but really getting people to answer questions and then share that through simple tools like Mentimeter program that we used, and they can see it and they can interact with it and they can reflect on it and build on it, and then you can save it, right? And you're capturing their more specific responses to whatever first 10 minutes of your presentation or last 20 minutes, doing that, but also the value of the feedback. And as an attendee, I'm not sure, and probably it's your experience as well. Oftentimes feedback is left towards the end and to the break time, okay? And at the end of the session, I feel like I want to help as an attendee, but at the same time, well, I really need to want to talk to that person or catch them before they leave, or I want to check the program. It's just right, and
absolutely,
and then you end up feeling it very quickly in those open-ended questions, just writing out something just to give something, but not really maybe that well thought through.
Absolutely, I can totally relate, and I know that a lot of people feel the same way. So,
yeah. To me, it's the biggest part, and obviously we've done so many online events these days, right? And that becomes particularly obvious when the Q&A gets squashed into, instead of 20 minutes, into 5 minutes, and you feel quite disappointed,
right,
to some extent, right? And you were really looking forward to that. But it's also explaining the value of the feedback. I remember in one of the courses that I taught, I said to the students, help me help you by providing as much informative feedback as possible. And we're all busy people. We value our time. So we want to know that whatever it is that we're doing, those 5 minutes that we're spending on providing feedback instead of talking to someone else in the break time, it's going to be used, and it's not a waste of time, of your time. And that's another one, is showing how previously feedback has been used to modify and improve an event. Also asking at the beginning of the session that, and it's about psychology, so you're obviously interested in neuroscience, and something that I wrote about in my thesis is desired self-image a lot. So how do we appeal to that desired self-image? Well, we could frame feedback as a contribution, as a way to help, as a thank you, right? So as an acknowledgement, and that all of a sudden creates that signals that that value, that feedback is important, and that you're actually doing something good. And we all want to do something good.
I love this insight. I love it. Yeah. And you know what, framing is my favorite concept, because I feel like we can win, and we can achieve so much just by using framing and framing things in a different way, right? Like you said, if people feel like they are contributing, right, and they are doing a favor, they will be more likely to act and to actually provide that feedback, and that will certainly improve the quality of the feedback.
And then if you combine that with demonstrating how it's been used before, then that, so it's not just about the survey, it's how you present the need for that survey and the value of that survey as well.
Yeah, I love it. In one of my next question is this. In one of your posts, you said survey questions are open to interpretation. And so we talked a little bit, or you talked a little bit about that right now, but are there any other ways to develop a more nuanced and deeper understanding of the attendee perspective about the event?
Yes, yeah. Yes, and then it comes down to the questions themselves, and then yes, coming back to also thinking beyond the survey and thinking about those pollings, quick polls that you can apply during the session, for example, or if you think really creatively and about the experience holistically, because it's not just about sitting in the room. It's where you enter, it's where you register, it's how you get a coffee, right? It's the time you have for interaction and networking, and creating opportunities for collecting feedback in engaging, interactive, and not obtrusive ways. So beyond the survey, and that comes to thinking about holistically also about the different stakeholders in the experience as well, right? So it's the attendees, it's the volunteers who are going to help out, it's everyone else who's involved on that day, and they can participate.
How do you develop that skill? I'm just thinking that a lot of event planners who may listen right now, they would think like, okay, well, probably I don't have this skill, and you probably know that event planners, they do a lot of different jobs, and it's like, the jacks of all trades. And of course, they may question this advice, and they would probably think that, okay, I just don't know how to do that, or I don't have time for that. So is there a way to develop this skill? And I'm saying this just because I remember myself at an event, and you are so overwhelmed with a lot of things that you need to do at the moment. And if on top of that, you're also required to observe or to, develop any other things to get the feedback from the attendees when you are at the moment, you are at the event, that may feel, even more overwhelming. So is there something that you would recommend doing just to prepare oneself or to improve the skill of listening and observing and getting the feedback that way?
Thank you for challenging me on that. Yes, it's all great, right? It's all great to come up with ideas, but how do you actually implement them? Now, you probably have a lot more experience with events than I do, but although I have organized events of my own, I've organized conferences. So let's think about it, how we can go about it. To me, first of all, it sounds more about initially feedback collection and collecting it in a variety of ways at different touch points in the experience as part of culture. So it needs to be a discussion at the event planning stage. What are the most important points that we want to collect feedback on? If we, and sometimes it's going to be, it's going to be informal, trying to think, well, obviously, if we are collecting about an experience around catering, right? So catering is quite important, for example. What can we do creatively and easy that would be fun? So someone is picking up their muffin. Okay, so I'm really brainstorming here, so I'm not basing that on any extensive research, but that's a big part of what I do. I stretch my clients' brains to think outside the box. So how can you integrate that with the catering stuff, for example? How you can brief them on being friendly and asking someone maybe to drop a color-coded card into a box about how happy they are with the experience, right? Just something like that in the moment, right? Or after they've eaten, or a simple example like that. Exit surveys, and then thinking about pre and post as well is something important. Yeah, it's a good question. So
absolutely. No, thank you for these suggestions. I think these are great, and it's just a food for thought. And I really, my aim with this conversation and, with the podcast itself is to help people start thinking about these things and to start creating psychological solutions. That's why I believe it's a good place to start, and your suggestions were great. So thank you for those. My my other question was, you attend an event and you get a post-event survey after that, and it often feels like the space is wasted because we've got a number of typical questions on a post-event survey, which everybody uses, and then we still do not receive the quality feedback. And because people are overwhelmed with those surveys, with information in general, right? They just don't care, and the quality of feedback is reduced, suffers, right? So we aim to receive the feedback to improve our event, but we end up not having a quality feedback. And there are a lot of useless questions in my view. For example, would you return next year? I mean, seriously, you're asking a person and you waste this question on a survey, and they check something yes or no, but it doesn't really help you in any way. So what was the most useless question that you came across?
Yeah. I thought that one was probably the top, really. Yeah. There's a lot of research that points out that intention is a very bad indicator, proxy indicator of future behavior. It's just not. And yet there are a lot of studies, particularly in tourism, that publish about intentions, and it's a very poor indicator of loyalty, but nonetheless it is one. So there's the gap between action and intention is enormous. What would be another one? Maybe this one. What's your overall satisfaction? Or has it met your expectations? And again, I'm bearing very understanding always. And if it's about you reporting very quickly in a snapshot, overall satisfaction, liked or not liked, justifying how well you did to your managers, for example, your funders, it's easy, right? So, and it is indicative to some extent of how happy the attendees were, but it's not very helpful because you don't really know what their expectations were and what particular aspects they were satisfied with. So then the challenge comes in with asking, what is it that you want to ask about? And you can't ask about everything, right? You could have kept it short. So I'm curious, actually, what's currently the number of questions that you see as the optimal one that's being asked in events?
Well, I did some research on that, actually. And while I didn't really find specific recommendations on these, because it's not that, many studies are done in the event context. But I got an understanding that about 10 questions is okay, given that people, again, don't want to spend a lot of time, because time is, precious, especially these days. So we don't want to overwhelm them with questions, but we also want to be creative and holistic in our approach to questions. And so it's one of my questions to you, actually, is, are there any basic key rules in designing the survey, so that we can get a most out of it? I mean, the way you ask questions, that's what you mentioned already. But I guess if there are any practical tips that you can share, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. And I think I will disappoint you to some extent by stating the obvious. It's about asking about the most important things for you first, right? So, and I would even say limiting the number of questions to 5, combining closed questions with open-ended ones, because you do want to have that context, but ultimately also helping your respondents with recall. So again, don't rely. So if you would like to know their overall impression, ask them about specific aspects of the event or specific modules or whatever it is, specific presenters. memory is fallible, so make it easy for people. Make it a ticker box experience, but also invite them to provide a few comments. So in that respect, it's about being specific and asking only those questions that will generate the information that you will be able to use. So, and I say that to anyone everywhere, regardless of the research. Why do you want to know this? We collect so much data these days, and a lot of data also comes in from observational data, analytics data. Event platforms, particularly for online events, collect a lot of data these days as well. So why not use that? So then for your survey, ask the questions that you can't collect the data in any other ways. And I would go as far, and I know some experts would probably say, well, you can also integrate AI, and you can use cameras and face recognition and whatnot to kind of gauge how people feel. I'm not a big fan of the Big Brother experience, so I'm not going to go there, but some would suggest. But as far as the surveys are concerned, just reducing the number of questions, knowing exactly how it's going to inform your decision making, and making them relevant to your audience as well, so that they're meaningful to them. And if they're meaningful to you, they will be meaningful to them. But I would narrow it down.
That's a great point. Ask yourself first why you are asking those questions, and then ask only those that will help you really improve and go further with the developments about the event. I love it.
Yeah. No, we do collect so much data unnecessarily.
Absolutely.
And then we don't use it.
I feel sometimes we're like kids who have, a lot of toys to play with, and they just so happy. We also feel so happy that now we have this opportunity to collect all this data, but then it's not necessarily helping us. So I do agree. My other question was about social listening. I wanted to ask you about the concept and to tell more about the concept and how it can be valuable in business events in particular.
Right. Yeah, sure. Yes, I have worked with social listening quite closely as a methodology and with social listening tools. And I see a lot of value in that. And one of the misconceptions about so maybe first of all, how do you currently understand social listening? So just for me to gauge.
I should admit I don't really know a lot about the concept itself. So how I understand it is that it's how you come across conversations about the brand online, for example, and that's how you take the information from there, take your conclusions from there, and actually come up with some suggestions to improve based on what you've listened.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. It's elements of social monitoring and social listening. So social listening to me, and to all the companies that have social listening tools, that there's the differentiation between kind of surface level listening, which is got to do more with measurable metrics and number of mentions, number of likes. That's also a way of listening. But if we talk about listening as to deeper understanding for that more nuanced perspective, then it's about reading into those conversations and across multiple channels. So it's not necessarily exclusively also social channels, it's also news channels. So there's a few tools out there that allow you to pull data from news websites, from blogs, from review sites. All of that is listening. And the other distinction is whether you're listening exactly to conversations around your brand and your particular event, or you're looking more broadly. And there's a few companies out there, and I share their perspective that social listening is about that those unstructured, unprompted conversations that are beyond your brand, and that's where you get insights from, because you tapping into conversations about your competitors or other relevant topics, and you pull insights from there. So how that could be used for events, same as for any other product, really. It's how you collect the data is another question. So with listening, obviously, it's a lot of unstructured conversations, and there's different ways to go about it. So if you're focusing around your brand, then online communities is a great tool, and there's a lot of qualitative researchers that are moving in that direction and using that data for insights. If you go beyond that, then you can use social listening tools, and there's an intricacies, and I'm not going to overload you with that, but it's about how many tokens you can use in terms of how many accounts you can access and upload of your competitors, of your own, for different products and services. And then you apply your own thinking, your own questions, as well as whatever functionality the platform allows you to package that data, to extract insights, to arrange them using various widgets. So it's a combination of human thinking and automated AI algorithms. And it's about also whether you are looking at a particular moment in time or conversations over time. So, for example, with certain events, if it's recurrent, then you could be looking at a period of a couple of years, right? If you can do that. And so that becomes an extra source of information. And that comes back to your question as to should we be listening to our customers? That's a way of listening. That's a way of listening without asking them directly.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I like it. Yeah. Right. So I'm mindful of the time left, but I do have 3 questions for you. First is, can you recommend any books that you loved or maybe you haven't read yet but think that might be interesting to read for non-academics, those who are not in behavioral science field but are interested in psychology and behavioral science and would gain something from those books for their professional daily routine?
Yes. One that comes to mind is by Bree Williams. Bree Williams on behavioral economics for business. So you might have crossed it, being a member of the behavioral science club. She's great.
Yeah, she is, and she actually was a guest on my podcast. So yes, that's great recommendation. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, so that one, because she makes it all very accessible. That's what I like about her, and very engaging. The other one, and I'll try to think something outside of the behavioral science club. Conversations That Matter by Daniel Stillman. I am yet to read the entire book. I do a lot of audiobooks, so I've been listening to it, and I listened to the first couple of chapters. But he provides some really interesting insights into constructing conversations. And a big component of event management is managing stakeholders and managing your teams and ensuring that alignment. So how do you do that? And coming back to what we were saying about feedback, oh, that's an extra thing to do. How do we integrate that into our behavior and our processes? That can cause some resistance. So he's great. He's got some strategies there as well that I really like. What else? I mean, probably the ones that you've heard about. So I really loved Alchemy by Rory Sutherland.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite books.
Yeah, from Ogilvy Consulting. So many examples, brilliant examples. And those would be my top 3 that spring to mind.
All right.
Yes, that I'm yet to finish all the way.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. And what is one research design finding or customer insight that you think event professionals should implement right away?
Okay. All right. All right, I'll try to be quick. What comes to mind to me? I would say being mindful of the overall shift for us as humans, as consumers, towards holistic experiences, and combining that with the understanding that hybrid events are here to stay. So we do need to be mindful of that experience, and a shift towards, as an interesting point I came across recently, that events are going to be more about meaning and connection and entertainment, and less about content. Ooh, that really. Content is important, but that makes me think, and I think if that's a trend that's been flagged for the future, I think there's a few things to think about there, but it does make sense. It does make sense,
right? Yeah, and I think it's something to think seriously about, right? There are so many. It's kind of thought-provoking. There are so many things that we need to consider going forward, how events change and how perception of events and expectations about events are changing. And some people believe that, yes, content is still king, while others claim that it's more about networking, for example, and building connections and building communities. A lot to think about. All right. And my last question is, because the video podcast title is What If I Told You, I always ask my guests to complete the sentence. And that sentence should be with any one takeaway from the conversation. So can you please complete the sentence? What if I told you?
Okay. What if I told you that there is no single source of truth? And I would add to that everything is open to interpretation, and that you truly want to innovate, you've got to be prepared to make leaps of faith.
That's brilliant. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your insights, Daria.
Thank you.
Please do connect with Daria on LinkedIn and elsewhere, and all the links will be also in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in to What If I Told You, the Event Psychology podcast. Remember, experiences take place in people's minds, first and foremost. For more brain science insights and recap of this episode, please join the Event Psychology Club. Until next time, bye-bye.
Thanks very much, Victoria.